Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The price of applause. There exists a kind of success that dazzles from a distance, applauded, envied, and endlessly celebrated. Yet beneath its glittering surface lies a quiet fracture. It is the kind of triumph that demands a cost so subtle, so gradual, that most people don't realize what they've traded until much later. The price is not material, it is the slow estrangement from one's own truth. In the name of ambition, people build careers brick by brick, chasing validation and recognition. They tell themselves that each promotion, each title, each nod of approval is proof of progress. And for a while, it works. The applause feels warm, the achievements comforting. But somewhere along that climb, something essential begins to unravel. It doesn't make noise, it doesn't announce its departure. It simply starts to fade, the bond with one's own inner voice. Modern life is built around ready-made models of success. We are told from childhood what paths: work, study hard, secure a stable job, achieve status, and you'll be happy. These rules are so deeply engraved in collective consciousness that few dare to question them. But the danger lies precisely in that unquestioning obedience. Because one day, after achieving what was promised, many realize that the feeling isn't victory, it's disorientation. A subtle misalignment, a quiet sense that something within no longer fits the world they've built. Carl Jung never described success as the conquest of the external world. For him, true triumph was preserving the integrity of the soul while walking through life's demands. He believed that the moment integrity is compromised, no number of steps upward can make up for what's lost inside. You can achieve everything, wealth, respect, admiration, and still feel suspended between what you do and who you truly are. It is not about rejecting the world, nor romanticizing withdrawal from it. It is about remembering the center, returning to the still point within where truth resides. It's about feeling real again in one's own choices, reconnecting to that sense of I am that can't be measured by salary, likes, or applause. Success that requires you to betray your essence may look like a good bargain, but it's an illusion, a poorly negotiated deal with yourself. So the question arises, not just what have you achieved, but who did you have to stop being to achieve it? That question alone reveals more truth than any resume ever could. Because in chasing approval, many unconsciously shed parts of themselves, curiosity, tenderness, creativity, even moral boundaries, all sacrificed at the altar of fitting in. The tragedy is that this disconnection doesn't feel like destruction at first. It feels like adaptation. You tell yourself, it's just how things are. You learn to speak the language of professionalism, of diplomacy, of performance. You polish your edges to blend in. But over time, what you call adaptation turns into erasure. You start living for expectations that were never truly yours. The world rewards the mask, not the person beneath it. You get praise for your consistency, your productivity, your drive. Yet inside, there's a quiet exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. It's the fatigue of pretending, of maintaining a version of yourself that functions perfectly yet feels hollow. Society calls it success, the soul calls it exile. Jung understood this conflict as a psychological split, the moment when the outer persona devours the inner being. The danger isn't that we fail, it's that we succeed at becoming someone we never wanted to be. And when that happens, every victory becomes strangely tasteless. You smile in photographs, accept congratulations, but the joy feels borrowed. Something in you whispers, "This isn't me." That whisper, though painful, is sacred. It is the signal that the soul has not given up. It waits patiently for your attention, for you to pause and listen again. Because real success is not found in applause or recognition, it is found in coherence, in being able to look at your reflection and see a person you respect. The world will never stop glorifying the race, the numbers, the constant movement forward. But somewhere along that race, you must decide what kind of victory you are chasing. One that fills your bank account, or one that restores your peace. One that earns you applause, or one that lets you sleep in quiet self-respect. The first kind of success will make the world admire you, the second will make you whole. And perhaps that is the ultimate paradox: to gain everything outside, you must not lose what is inside. Because the applause will fade, the trophies will gather dust, but your inner truth, if protected, will keep its light forever. That is the only success that cannot be bought, borrowed, or performed. It must be lived. The performance of a life. Many people do not live, they perform. They move through each day as actors in a well-rehearsed play, repeating lines written long before they understood their own voice. They wear professionalism like a costume, polish their words until they sound acceptable, and smile in places where silence would feel more honest. Slowly, the mask becomes second nature. And over time, the performance becomes the only version of self the world is allowed to see. Carl Jung called this the persona, the face we show to society. It is not evil, it is necessary. Every civilization depends on it. But when the persona becomes the only face we know, when the act continues even in solitude, something precious starts to die inside us. The self, that quiet, instinctive truth, begins to fade behind the script of who we think we should be. At work, you mold yourself into the image of competence. With friends, you adjust your tone to remain likable. In family gatherings, you mute your frustrations to keep the peace. You calibrate every emotion, every gesture, until your natural rhythm feels foreign. You begin to confuse adaptation with authenticity. You start believing that your worth depends on performance. It's subtle, but deadly. You tell yourself you're just being professional, just being considerate, just doing what's required. Yet one day, you wake up realizing that you've built relationships not on truth, but on image. You've taught people to love the version of you that never complains, never disagrees, never needs rest. And when you finally feel lonely, it's because no one, not even you, knows the real person behind the perfect act. This disconnection from the self does not arrive with thunder. It settles quietly, like dust on an unused piano. It begins with small compromises, biting your tongue to avoid conflict, laughing at jokes that wound your dignity, accepting praise for achievements that mean nothing to your heart. At first, these moments seem harmless. But they add up. Each unspoken truth leaves a residue. Each false smile becomes a tiny betrayal. And one day, you feel it, a heavy stillness inside, a sense that life is happening without you in it. The world, of course, celebrates your consistency. It rewards your control, your compliance, your flawless delivery. No one sees the exhaustion that lives behind your eyes, because your exhaustion is socially acceptable. You are functional, and that is all that's required. Yet inside, your soul whispers its protest in the only language it knows, anxiety without cause, nights of restless thoughts, a dull ache where joy used to live. The tragedy is not that you are misunderstood by others, but that you begin to misunderstand yourself. You start confusing your roles with your identity. You are the employee, the partner, the friend, but who are you when the lights dim and no one's watching? That question, once ignored, becomes a haunting presence. To the outside world, you are successful. Inside, you feel like a stranger in your own life. You crave silence but fear it, because silence strips away the roles and reveals the emptiness beneath. You crave connection but avoid it, because true connection demands vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens the image you've worked so hard to protect. This is not weakness, it is the human condition distorted by performance. We live in a culture that rewards appearance over essence, output over authenticity. We are trained to act. To keep smiling, even when our souls are cracking beneath the weight of expectations. But there comes a moment, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow, when you cannot keep pretending. The applause grows quieter, and the hollowness grows louder. That is the moment the self begins to stir again. It begins with unease, the subtle awareness that your laughter sounds practiced, that your yes carries resentment, that your confidence feels scripted. These are not flaws, they are signs of awakening. The truth does not arrive with clarity, it begins with discomfort. Jung believed that this tension between persona and soul was not a failure but an invitation, the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. It requires courage to step off stage, to look at your reflection and admit how long you've been performing. But it is only through that honesty that healing begins. Because life is not meant to be performed. It is meant to be lived, imperfectly, vulnerably, truthfully. And while the mask may protect you from judgment, it also shields you from love. No one can truly love you while you are acting. They can only love the character you play. So, the question becomes, how much longer will you keep playing a role that earns applause but empties your soul? The curtain is still yours to lift. You can walk off stage at any time. And when you do, the silence that follows won't be loneliness, it will be freedom. The trap of modern success. From an early age, the world tells you a single story, that success equals fulfillment. Follow the rules, collect the badges, the diploma, the career, the financial stability, and happiness will follow like a loyal shadow. But what no one tells you is that sometimes, when you finally arrive at that shining destination, you find yourself standing in a desert. Everything you chased now feels hollow, and the life you worked so hard to build no longer feels like your own. The modern narrative of success is seductive because it promises control. It gives you measurable steps and visible rewards, things that make you feel safe. Yet it rarely asks the essential question, does this path align with who you truly are? The problem is not ambition itself, ambition can be sacred. The problem begins when success becomes the only definition of value, when life is reduced to goals, metrics, and comparisons. Then, without realizing it, you start to live a borrowed life, one engineered to impress, not to express. You begin to mold yourself to fit the system. You work longer hours, accept roles that suffocate creativity, and silence doubts that whisper, "This isn't me." You convince yourself it's temporary, that all sacrifices will make sense later. But later never arrives, because the system keeps moving the goalpost. Every milestone achieved simply reveals another. Every victory fades faster than the last. Carl Jung wrote, "The unlived life is a disease from which one can die." What he meant was that neglecting your inner truth, your unlived potential, your ignored passions, slowly poisons the soul. You might not die physically, but you become emotionally anesthetized. The symptoms are subtle: persistent fatigue, loss of enthusiasm, a quiet sense that something essential is missing even when everything appears fine. You tell yourself you're grateful, and you are. Yet the gratitude feels forced, rehearsed, as if you're trying to convince yourself that happiness has finally arrived. Success can become a trap because it is so heavily praised that you fear questioning it. To doubt the race feels like betrayal. To pause feels like failure. So you keep running, even as your spirit falls behind. And because the world keeps applauding your performance, you convince yourself that the emptiness inside is just exhaustion, not warning. But deep down, you know. You can climb the corporate ladder, but if it's leaning against the wrong wall, every step only takes you further from yourself. You can build a flawless reputation, but if it's built on suppression, it will crumble under the weight of authenticity waiting to be heard. You can appear successful to the world while quietly mourning the person you were meant to be. That is the silent tragedy of modern life. The applause drowns out the cry of the soul. The reason this trap is so powerful is that it disguises itself as progress. You think you're moving forward when, in truth, you're circling an ever-narrowing orbit around emptiness. You adapt to environments that don't welcome your real self. You trade spontaneity for consistency, passion for performance. And society rewards it, with pay raises, with likes, with status. Yet each reward feels strangely distant, as if it belongs to someone else. By the time you realize it, you've invested so much that turning back seems impossible. You've spent years building an image, curating a version of yourself that the world admires. You fear that changing course will make you look lost or unstable. You fear disappointing others more than you fear losing yourself. And so you stay. You stay in careers, relationships, and habits that drain you because they look good on paper. But here is the truth: failure is not changing direction, failure is refusing to. Failure is continuing to walk a path that empties you just because you've walked it for too long. Failure is betraying your essence for approval that will never fill the void. The courage to realign, that is not failure. That is awakening. The modern trap of success can be escaped, but only through radical honesty. You must ask yourself not, what do I want to achieve? But who am I becoming while I achieve it? Because success that demands your soul as collateral is not success, it's captivity. You are not meant to be an echo of expectations. You are meant to be a living expression of your truth. And the moment you realize that, the trap begins to dissolve. Not because the world changes, but because you finally do. The return to the self. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you realize the applause no longer comforts you. The achievements you once celebrated now echo hollowly, and the mirror reflects a face you barely recognize. That moment, though painful, is sacred. It is the invitation to return to yourself. At first, you resist it. You tell yourself you're simply tired, that a vacation or a new project will fix everything. But the unease doesn't fade, it deepens. You begin to sense that the problem isn't around you, it's within. You've spent so long being who the world needed you to be that you've forgotten what it feels like to move in rhythm with your own heart. The path forward isn't about acquiring more, it's about peeling away what never belonged to you. The return begins with a pause. A brutally honest one. You stop running, stop pretending, stop explaining. You sit in silence, the kind of silence that exposes everything you've buried. In that stillness, your neglected truths begin to surface, the decisions you made from fear, the times you said yes to avoid disapproval, the talents you abandoned because they didn't fit the script. The silence is uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is the language of awakening. It's how the soul calls you home. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious never stops communicating, it waits for us to listen. And when we do, the process of individuation begins, the integration of who we are with who we pretend to be. This process doesn't happen through theory, it happens through experience, through the daily practice of truth. One of the most powerful steps toward reconnection is radical listening. It means sitting with yourself without distraction, without music, without scrolling, without performing. It means letting the chaos of your thoughts play out until clarity begins to emerge. This isn't meditation in a stylized sense, it's confrontation. Because when you remove the noise, the real voices start to speak, the ones you've silenced for years. The voice that says, "I'm not happy here." The voice that says, "This isn't my dream." The voice that says, "I miss who I was before I started proving myself." Writing can also become a bridge back to your inner world. Jung called it a dialogue with the unconscious. Take a notebook and let your hand move without censorship. Write until the words surprise you. At first, what surfaces may seem incoherent, anger, grief, longing, but these emotions are not enemies, they are messengers. They are fragments of the self asking to be reintegrated. Reconnection doesn't require grand transformation, it starts with small, symbolic acts. Go for a walk without headphones. Cook something with presence. Say no to something minor simply because your heart doesn't want to say yes. These gestures seem insignificant, yet they carry immense power. They tell your psyche, "I'm here now. I matter again." But returning to yourself also means facing one of the hardest truths of all, that not everyone will celebrate your awakening. When you begin to set boundaries, when you stop performing the role others enjoyed, their comfort will be disturbed. People who benefited from your compliance may call your authenticity rebellion. Friends may label your truth change. Family may call it disrespect. Yet none of this means you are wrong. It means you are finally living from your center instead of orbiting theirs. This pain, the pain of disappointing others, is the price of freedom. Every no that protects your peace becomes an act of courage. Every moment you honor your intuition over expectation strengthens your integrity. Jung once wrote that individuation is a process of separation, separating from inherited values, from masks, from illusions that no longer serve. It hurts because it dismantles everything that once made you feel safe. But safety built on self-betrayal is not safety, it's quiet suffocation. With time, something miraculous begins to happen. The anxiety lessens. The restlessness eases. You begin to recognize yourself again, not the polished persona, but the original rhythm of your being. You speak more slowly, listen more deeply, breathe more fully. You no longer seek validation in the eyes of others because your own gaze has become enough. And then one day, you notice something extraordinary, the world hasn't ended. The relationships that survive your honesty become richer. The opportunities that align with your truth feel lighter. You stop living to perform and start living to experience. Returning to yourself is not a retreat from life, it is the most profound way of re-entering it. Because now, for the first time, you are present. Whole. Real. Wholeness, the only real success. In the end, success loses its meaning if it doesn't bring you peace. You can reach every milestone, gather wealth, and collect admiration, yet still wake up feeling strangely absent from your own life. True success begins where pretense ends, in the quiet, unglamorous act of being fully yourself. When the noise of ambition fades and the lights go dim, what remains is not your resume, your titles, or your possessions. What remains is the relationship you hold with yourself. That inner space, once neglected, becomes the measure of everything else. Carl Jung wrote that the soul does not care about achievements, it cares about integration. The soul's goal is not triumph, but wholeness. And wholeness cannot be bought, taught, or performed. It must be lived, daily, in truth. Wholeness is not perfection. It is the union of light and shadow, of all the parts you once tried to hide or deny. It is saying, "This is who I am," without shame. It's standing in front of the mirror of consciousness, not the literal one in your bathroom, but the one that reflects your inner state, and feeling peace, not pride. The soul seeks honesty more than applause. It doesn't chase after goals, it seeks coherence between what you believe, what you do, and who you are. For most people, this realization arrives after years of striving. You spend half your life proving, competing, adjusting, until exhaustion becomes your normal state. Then, one day, something inside whispers, "Enough." It's not a collapse, it's an awakening. You begin to see that the endless pursuit of success was never about joy, it was about validation. And when you stop chasing approval, the horizon opens. Life begins to breathe again. Living in alignment with yourself requires courage, because truth is rarely convenient. You may lose people. You may walk away from opportunities that no longer fit. You may stand alone for a time, misunderstood by those who still measure worth in noise and numbers. But what you gain is immeasurable: integrity. And integrity, once restored, becomes your anchor. It allows you to live lightly, without the constant fear of being exposed, because you have nothing left to hide. The world still values performance, but you no longer have to. You start making decisions not from pressure, but from clarity. You choose what nourishes you instead of what merely impresses others. You work, create, and love from an authentic place, not to prove something, but because it feels right. You rediscover joy in simplicity, in honest conversations, in quiet mornings, in knowing you no longer have to pretend. Wholeness is not a final destination, it is a daily practice. Some days you will feel connected, alive, clear. Other days, you will falter, fall into old habits, or doubt yourself. But the difference now is awareness. You no longer abandon yourself for long. You know the way back, through silence, through truth, through the small acts that realign you with your essence. In this space of alignment, success takes on a new form. It becomes less about applause and more about authenticity. Less about having more, and more about being more real, more honest, more alive. You stop comparing your journey to others because you understand that every soul has its own rhythm. The race ends, and the real living begins. And when you look back, you realize that every collapse, every disillusionment, every moment of discomfort was necessary. The pain was not punishment, it was purification. It stripped away the illusions that kept you bound to an image, revealing the truth underneath, that you were always enough, even before the world said so. When you reach this place, you no longer crave validation. You no longer fear solitude. You no longer chase approval that costs you your peace. You understand now that losing everything false is not loss at all, it's liberation. So when you stand before that inner mirror, and the reflection looking back is whole, imperfect, and honest, that is success. Not the kind measured by numbers or noise, but the kind that brings stillness. The kind that feels like home. And perhaps that's the real lesson of this entire journey. Success is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Because when you return to that truth, unpolished, unfiltered, and whole, you discover the one form of success that can never be taken away. Peace.